She thought it was just one wild night until she woke up to a fake marriage proposal from her boss. This is the story of how one woman turned a scandal into a second chance at love and justice. Before we uncover Naomi's shocking journey, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you love stories of second chances and unexpected love, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. The bass thumped through the walls of Eclipse, one of Atlanta's most exclusive nightclubs, as Naomi Carter swayed to the rhythm, her curls bouncing with every move. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, sweat, and the faint tang of champagne. She raised her glass, the golden liquid catching the strobe lights, and toasted to herself. "To Naomi Carter, the newest associate at Harper & Lawson," she whispered, though no one could hear her over the music. She had every reason to celebrate. After years of grinding through law school, internships, and countless rejections, she had finally landed a job at one of the most prestigious law firms in Atlanta. It was a dream come true, and tonight she was determined to let loose. Naomi wasn't usually one for clubs, but tonight felt different. She was dressed to kill in a sleek black dress that hugged her curves, paired with heels that made her feel invincible. She had even splurged on a fresh manicure, her nails painted a deep crimson that matched her lipstick. For once, she wasn't the girl buried in the case files or running on coffee and ambition. Tonight, she was the star of her own story. That's when she saw him. He was leaning against the bar, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the casual attire of the other patrons. His dark skin glowed under the club's lights, and his sharp jawline was accentuated by the shadow of a well-groomed beard. He looked like he belonged on the cover of a magazine, not in a crowded Atlanta nightclub. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Naomi felt her breath hitch, but she quickly composed herself. She wasn't one to get flustered easily. He approached her with a confidence that was both intimidating and alluring. "You look like you're celebrating something," he said, his voice smooth and deep, like velvet. Naomi smirked, taking a sip of her champagne. "Maybe I am. What's it to you?" He chuckled, the sound sending a shiver down her spine. "I'm just curious. A woman like you doesn't come to a place like this without a reason." "A woman like me?" She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Beautiful, confident, ambitious." He leaned in closer, his cologne a mix of sandalwood and something spicy washing over her. "I'm Marcus, by the way." "Naomi?" she replied, extending her hand. He took it, his grip firm but not overpowering, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. The night blurred after that. They danced, they drank, they laughed. Marcus was charming, witty, and surprisingly easy to talk to. He told her about his work in corporate law, his love for jazz, and his grandmother, who he adored. Naomi found herself opening up to him in a way she hadn't with anyone in a long time. She told him about her mom, who was battling a chronic illness, and how this job was her chance to finally give her the life she deserved. By the time they stumbled out of the club, the sun was just beginning to peek over the Atlanta skyline. Marcus hailed a cab, and before she knew it, they were at a luxury hotel downtown. The room was a blur of silk sheets, whispered promises, and stolen kisses. Naomi let herself get lost in the moment, in him. For once, she wasn't thinking about bills, or her mom's medical expenses, or the mountain of student loans waiting for her. She was just Naomi, a woman who deserved to feel wanted. When she woke up the next morning, the reality of what she had done hit her like a ton of bricks. Marcus was still asleep, his arm draped over her waist. She carefully slipped out of bed, her heart pounding as she gathered her clothes. What had she been thinking? She didn't even know this man. And yet, she had spent the night with him, like they were old lovers. As she dressed, her eyes fell on her phone, which was lying on the nightstand. She grabbed it, her hands trembling, and quietly made her way to the door. She needed to get out of there before he woke up, before things got complicated. But as she stepped into the elevator, a sinking feeling settled in her stomach. She had forgotten her phone. She cursed under her breath, but there was no way she was going back. She'd figure it out later. Right now, she needed to get home, shower, and pretend last night never happened. Naomi's heart was still racing as she walked into the sleek modern offices of Harper & Lawson the next morning. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the night over and over. What had she been thinking? She was a professional, for God's sake. She couldn't afford to make mistakes like this, not when she had just landed her dream job. She smoothed down her blazer and adjusted her scarf, trying to project an air of confidence she didn't feel. The office was buzzing with activity, and she quickly made her way to her desk, hoping to blend in. But as she sat down, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, only to realize it wasn't her phone. It was Marcus's. Her stomach dropped. She must have grabbed the wrong phone in her haste to leave the hotel. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. What was she supposed to do now? She couldn't exactly call him and ask to swap phones. That would mean admitting she had taken his phone, and she wasn't ready to face him again. Before she could come up with a plan, a familiar voice broke through her thoughts. "Good morning, everyone." Naomi froze. That voice. It couldn't be. She slowly turned around, her heart pounding in her chest. And there he was, Marcus, standing at the front of the room, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his expression calm and composed. He was her new boss. Her stomach churned as the realization hit her. She had slept with her boss, her married boss. Oh God, this was a disaster. Marcus's eyes scanned the room, and for a brief moment, they landed on her. There was no recognition in his gaze, no hint that he remembered her from last night. He simply nodded and continued with his announcement. "I'm Marcus Harper, one of the senior partners here at Harper & Lawson. I'll be overseeing some of your cases, so feel free to come to me with any questions or concerns." Naomi felt like she was going to be sick. She couldn't believe this was happening. She had to get out of there. She stood up, her legs wobbling, and made a beeline for the restroom. Once inside, she locked herself in a stall and took deep breaths, trying to calm herself down. This was bad. Really bad. She couldn't afford to lose this job, not when her mom's surgery was coming up. She had to figure out a way to fix this, but how? As she sat there, her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out, her hands trembling, and saw a text from an unknown number. "I think you have my phone." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. It was Marcus. She quickly typed out a response. "I'm so sorry. I must have grabbed the wrong one last night. I'll return it to you as soon as possible." She waited for his reply, her stomach in knots. When it finally came, it was short and to the point. "Meet me in my office at noon." Naomi groaned. This was going to be a long day. Naomi sat at her desk, her fingers drumming nervously against the keyboard. The clock on her computer screen seemed to mock her, each tick bringing her closer to noon. She had spent the entire morning trying to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting back to the night before and the mess she had gotten herself into. When the clock finally struck 12, she took a deep breath and stood up. Her legs felt like jelly as she made her way to Marcus's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear him speaking on the phone. She hesitated for a moment before knocking lightly. "Come in," his voice called out. Naomi pushed the door open and stepped inside. Marcus was seated behind a large mahogany desk, his suit jacket draped over the back of his chair. He looked every bit the powerful attorney, his expression calm and composed. But when his eyes met hers, there was a flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, or maybe just curiosity. "Naomi," he said, gesturing for her to sit, "close the door behind you." She did as she was told, her heart pounding in her chest. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioner. She sat down in the chair across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I believe you have something of mine," Marcus said, his tone neutral. Naomi nodded and reached into her bag, pulling out his phone. She placed it on the desk between them, her fingers trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry about the mix-up. I didn't mean to take it." Marcus picked up the phone and examined it briefly before setting it aside. "It's fine. These things happen." There was a pause, and Naomi felt the weight of his gaze on her. She wanted to say something, to explain herself, but the words caught in her throat. What could she possibly say? "Sorry I slept with you last night, and by the way, I'm your new employee." "Naomi," Marcus began, his voice softer now. "About last night." She shook her head quickly, cutting him off. "It was a mistake, a huge mistake. I shouldn't have let things get out of hand. I'm really sorry, and I promise it won't happen again." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "I'm not going to lie, Naomi. This is complicated, but I think we can handle it professionally. What happened last night stays between us. Agreed?" She nodded, relief flooding through her. "Agreed." There was another pause, and Naomi thought that was the end of it. But then Marcus spoke again, his tone more serious. "There's something else I need to discuss with you." Her stomach dropped. "What now?" "My grandmother is very ill," he said, his voice tinged with sadness. "She's been pressuring me to settle down and get married. It's her dying wish, and she's made it clear that if I don't comply, she'll cut me out of her will." Naomi frowned, confused. "I'm sorry to hear that, but what does that have to do with me?" Marcus leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "I need someone to play the role of my wife, just for a little while, until my grandmother passes." Naomi's eyes widened in shock. "You want me to pretend to be your wife?" "It wouldn't be a real marriage," he clarified quickly. "Just a contract, a business arrangement. You'd be compensated, of course." She shook her head, still trying to process what he was saying. "This is insane. I can't do that." Marcus's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I'm desperate, Naomi. My grandmother means the world to me, and I can't let her down. Not when she's so close to the end." Naomi hesitated, her mind racing. She couldn't believe she was even considering this. But then she thought about her mom, lying in a hospital bed, waiting for a surgery they couldn't afford. She thought about the mountain of debt she was buried under, and how this job was her only chance at a better life. "How much?" she asked quietly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "How much would you pay me?" He leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. "Name your price." Naomi took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was crazy, absolutely crazy. But what choice did she have? 50,000, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Done." She stared at him, stunned. "Just like that?" "Just like that," he replied. "But there's one condition." "What?" "You have to sell it," he said, his tone serious. "My grandmother is sharp, even in her condition. She'll know if we're faking it. So, you have to make her believe that we're madly in love." Naomi swallowed hard, her mind spinning. This was insane, but she needed the money, and if she could pull this off, it could change everything. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." Marcus smiled, a genuine smile that made her heart skip a beat. "Thank you, Naomi. You won't regret this." She wasn't so sure about that, but as she left his office and made her way back to her desk, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of excitement. This was the start of something new, something dangerous, and she had no idea what she was getting herself into. Naomi sat in her apartment later that evening, staring at the contract Marcus had emailed her. The document was long and filled with legal jargon, but the gist of it was clear. She was to pretend to be his wife for the next 6 months, or until his grandmother passed away, whichever came first. In exchange, she would receive 50,000 half up front, and the rest at the end of the arrangement. She read through the terms carefully, her mind racing. The contract outlined everything from how they were to behave in public to what would happen if either of them broke the agreement. There were clauses about confidentiality, non-disclosure, and even a provision for a fake wedding ceremony. It was also clinical, like a business deal, which, she supposed, it was. But as she scrolled through the document, one clause caught her eye. The parties agree to maintain a professional relationship at all times. Any romantic or sexual involvement outside the scope of this agreement is strictly prohibited. Naomi's cheeks burned as she remembered the night at the hotel. That had definitely been outside the scope of professionalism. She quickly pushed the thought aside and focused on the task at hand. She needed to make a decision. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. It was a text from her mom. "Hey, sweetie, just checking in. How's the new job?" Naomi's heart ached as she typed out a reply. "It's going great, Mom. Really busy, but I'm learning a lot." She hesitated before adding, "How are you feeling?" Her mom's response came quickly. "Hanging in there. The doctors say the surgery should be scheduled soon. Don't worry about me, though. Focus on your new job. I'm so proud of you." Tears pricked at the corners of Naomi's eyes. Her mom had always been her biggest cheerleader, even when things were tough. She deserved the best care, and Naomi was determined to give it to her no matter what it took. With a deep breath, she picked up her laptop and began typing an email to Marcus. Subject, Contract. Marcus, I've reviewed the contract and I'm willing to move forward under the terms we discussed. However, I have a few conditions of my own. 1. The $50,000 will be paid in full up front. 2. I will not be expected to attend any work-related events as your wife. This arrangement is strictly for your grandmother. 3. If at any point I feel uncomfortable or want to end the agreement, I reserve the right to do so without penalty. If these terms are acceptable, let me know and I'll sign the contract. Naomi. She hit send and leaned back in her chair, her heart pounding. This was it. There was no turning back now. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. It was Marcus. Terms accepted. I'll have the revised contract sent over tonight. Be ready to meet my grandmother tomorrow. Naomi's stomach churned. Tomorrow? This was moving faster than she had anticipated, but she didn't have time to second-guess herself. She had made her decision, and now she had to see it through. The next morning, Naomi dressed carefully in a simple yet elegant dress, paired with a blazer and heels. She wanted to make a good impression on Marcus's grandmother, but she also didn't want to look like she was trying too hard. As she applied a light layer of makeup, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. What if his grandmother saw right through her? What if this whole thing blew up in her face? Marcus picked her up in a sleek black car, his expression unreadable as she slid into the passenger seat. Ready? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be, she replied, forcing a smile. The drive to his grandmother's house was quiet, the tension between them palpable. Naomi couldn't help but steal glances at him as he drove. He looked so different in the daylight, more serious, more guarded. She wondered if he was as nervous as she was. When they arrived at the house, Naomi's breath caught in her throat. It was a sprawling estate, complete with a manicured lawn and a fountain in the driveway. She had known Marcus was wealthy, but this was on another level. Marcus led her inside, where they were greeted by a nurse. "She's been waiting for you," the nurse said with a smile. "She's in the sunroom." Naomi's heart raced as they made their way to the sunroom. When they entered, she saw an elderly woman sitting in a wheelchair, a blanket draped over her lap. She had Marcus's eyes sharp and intelligent, but there was a warmth to her gaze that put Naomi at ease. "Grandmother," Marcus said, his voice soft. "This is Naomi." The woman smiled, extending a frail hand. "It's so nice to meet you, dear. Marcus has told me so much about you." Naomi shook her hand gently, forcing a smile. "It's nice to meet you too, Mrs. Harper." "Oh, please, call me Eleanor," the woman said, her voice warm. "Come, sit down. Tell me all about yourself." Naomi sat down across from her, her mind racing. She had rehearsed a backstory with Marcus, but now that she was face to face with Eleanor, it all felt so fake. Still, she had to sell it. "Well," she began, "I'm originally from Richmond, but I moved to Atlanta for law school. That's actually how Marcus and I met." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with interest. "Oh, do tell." Naomi glanced at Marcus, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. "We met at a networking event," she said, sticking to the script they had agreed on. "We hit it off right away, and the rest is history." Eleanor smiled, clearly pleased. "I'm so glad Marcus found someone like you. He's been so focused on his career, I was starting to worry he'd never settle down." Naomi forced a laugh, though it felt hollow. "Well, he's definitely a hard worker, but he's also incredibly kind and thoughtful. I'm lucky to have him." Marcus cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the praise. "Grandmother, we don't want to tire you out. Maybe we can visit again soon." Eleanor waved a hand dismissively. "Nonsense, I'm fine. But if you two have things to do, I understand. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" Naomi asked. "Take care of each other," Eleanor said, her voice soft but firm. "That's all I ask." Naomi's heart ached at the sincerity in her words. She nodded, forcing a smile. "We will." As they left the house and got back into the car, Naomi felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had just lied to a dying woman. What kind of person did that make her? Marcus seemed to sense her unease. "You did well," he said quietly. "Thank you." Naomi nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just made a deal with the devil. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Naomi settled into her new role at Harper & Lawson, balancing her work as an associate with her fake marriage to Marcus. It was a delicate balancing act, but she managed to pull it off mostly. She attended family dinners with Marcus's grandmother, played the doting wife at social events, and even posed for a few photos that Marcus sent to Eleanor to keep her happy. But as the days went by, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her. It started with small things: a file missing from her desk, a strange look from a colleague, a whispered conversation that stopped the moment she walked into the room. At first, she brushed it off as paranoia, but then the incidents became harder to ignore. One morning, she arrived at work to find her office in disarray. Papers were scattered across the floor, her desk drawers had been rifled through, and her computer was turned on, the screen displaying an error message. She stared at the mess, her heart pounding. Who would do something like this? Before she could process what had happened, Marcus appeared in the doorway. "What's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "I don't know," Naomi replied, her voice shaking. "I just got here, and it was like this." Marcus stepped inside, his expression darkening as he surveyed the damage. "This isn't right. I'll have security look into it." Naomi nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a random break-in. Someone was targeting her, but who and why? The next incident happened a few days later. Naomi was in the break room, pouring herself a cup of coffee, when she overheard two colleagues talking. "Did you hear about Naomi?" one of them whispered. "Apparently, she's only here because she's sleeping with Marcus." Naomi froze, her hand tightening around the coffee pot. She wanted to confront them, to set the record straight, but she couldn't, not without revealing the truth about her arrangement with Marcus. Instead, she quietly left the break room, her mind racing. Who was spreading these rumors, and how far had they gone? The final straw came when she received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "I know your secret." Naomi's heart skipped a beat as she opened the message. The body of the email was short and to the point. "I know about your fake marriage. If you don't want everyone to find out, meet me at the park tonight at 8 p.m. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Who could have found out? And what did they want from her? That evening, Naomi arrived at the park, her nerves on edge. She scanned the area, looking for anyone suspicious, but the park was mostly empty. Just as she was about to leave, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Vanessa, one of the senior associates at the firm. She was dressed in a sleek black coat, her expression cold and calculating. "Vanessa?" Naomi asked, her voice trembling. "What's going on?" Vanessa smirked. "I know about your little arrangement with Marcus, and if you don't want everyone to find out, you'll do exactly as I say." Naomi's stomach churned. "What do you want?" Vanessa stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "I want Marcus, and you're going to help me get him." Naomi shook her head, her mind reeling. "I can't do that." Vanessa's smirk turned into a sneer. "Oh, you will. Unless you want everyone to know the truth about your fake marriage. Imagine how that would look for Marcus and for you." Naomi felt a wave of panic wash over her. She couldn't let this get out, not just for her sake, but for Marcus's too. But she couldn't betray him either. She was trapped. "I'll give you until the end of the week to decide," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with malice. "But just remember, I'm not the only one who knows your secret." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Naomi standing alone in the park, her mind racing. She had no idea what to do, but one thing was clear: she was in way over her head. Naomi spent the next few days in a state of constant anxiety. Vanessa's threat loomed over her like a dark cloud, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she walked into the office, she felt the weight of her colleagues' stares, and every whispered conversation made her wonder if they were talking about her. She tried to focus on her work, but it was nearly impossible. Her mind kept drifting back to Vanessa's ultimatum. What was she going to do? She couldn't betray Marcus, but she couldn't let Vanessa expose their secret either. She was trapped, and she had no idea how to get out. To make matters worse, Marcus seemed to be avoiding her. They hadn't spoken since the incident in her office, and every time she tried to approach him, he was either in a meeting or too busy to talk. She couldn't help but feel like he was distancing himself from her, and it only added to her growing sense of isolation. One evening, as she was leaving the office, she received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the Rusty Spoon." Naomi frowned. The Rusty Spoon was a small diner near her apartment, but she had no idea who could be asking her to meet there. Still, she was desperate for answers, so she decided to go. When she arrived at the diner, she scanned the room, looking for whoever had sent the text. Her eyes landed on a familiar face, and her heart skipped a beat. It was Derek, her ex-boyfriend. He was sitting in a booth near the back, his expression unreadable as he watched her approach. Naomi's mind raced. What was he doing here? And why did he want to talk to her? "Derek," she asked, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" He gestured for her to sit down. "We need to talk." Naomi hesitated for a moment before sliding into the booth across from him. "How did you get my number?" Derek shrugged. "I have my ways, but that's not important right now. What's important is that you're in trouble, Naomi." Her stomach churned. "What are you talking about?" Derek leaned forward, his expression serious. "I know about your arrangement with Marcus, and I know that Vanessa is blackmailing you." Naomi's eyes widened in shock. "How do you know about that?" "It doesn't matter," Derek replied. "What matters is that I can help you." Naomi shook her head, her mind reeling. "Why would you help me, after everything that happened between us?" Derek's expression softened. "Because I still care about you, Naomi, and I don't want to see you get hurt." Naomi felt a lump form in her throat. She and Derek had ended things on bad terms, but she had never stopped caring about him. Still, she couldn't trust him not after everything that had happened. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I want you to come back to me, Naomi. Leave Marcus. Leave this fake marriage behind. We can start over, just the two of us." Naomi pulled her hand away, her heart pounding. "I can't do that, Derek. This isn't just about me. It's about my mom, and her surgery, and—" "I'll help you," Derek interrupted. "I'll give you the money you need. You don't have to do this, Naomi. You don't have to sell yourself to Marcus." Naomi felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that she could walk away from all of this and start over. But she couldn't. Not when so much was at stake. "I can't," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, Derek, but I can't." Derek's expression hardened, and he leaned back in his seat. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. If you stay with Marcus, you're going to regret it." With that, he stood up and walked out of the diner, leaving Naomi sitting alone in the booth, her mind racing. She had no idea what to do. But one thing was clear. She was running out of time. Naomi's life had become a whirlwind of stress and uncertainty. Between Vanessa's blackmail, Derek's unexpected reappearance, and the constant pressure of maintaining her fake marriage to Marcus, she felt like she was teetering on the edge of a breakdown. She needed to talk to someone, anyone who could help her make sense of the chaos. But who could she trust? Marcus had been distant, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something from her. Derek's sudden reappearance had only added to her confusion, and Vanessa's threats were growing more ominous by the day. Naomi felt like she was trapped in a web of lies, and she had no idea how to escape. One evening, after another tense family dinner with Marcus's grandmother, Naomi decided she couldn't keep the secret any longer. She needed to come clean to someone, and there was only one person she could think of who might understand. She knocked on Marcus's office door late that night, her heart pounding in her chest. He looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. "Naomi, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "It's important." Marcus hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Come in." Naomi stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. Vanessa knows about our arrangement." Marcus's eyes widened in shock. "What? How?" "I don't know," Naomi admitted, "but she's blackmailing me. She wants me to help her get to you, or she's going to expose us." Marcus's expression darkened, and he leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "This is bad, really bad." "I know," Naomi said, her voice breaking. "And that's not all. Derek, my ex. He showed up out of nowhere. He knows about the arrangement too, and he's offering to help me if I leave you." Marcus's jaw tightened, and he stood up, pacing the room. "This is a disaster. If Vanessa and Derek both know, it's only a matter of time before the whole firm finds out." Naomi felt tears welling up in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Marcus stopped pacing and turned to face her, his expression softening. This isn't your fault, Naomi. I should have been more careful. I should have protected you. Naomi shook her head, the tears spilling over. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how to get out. Marcus stepped closer, his voice gentle. We'll figure this out together, but there's something I need to tell you first. Naomi looked up at him, her heart pounding. What is it? Marcus took a deep breath, his expression serious. My grandmother's condition is worsening. The doctors say she doesn't have much time left. Naomi's stomach churned. I'm so sorry, Marcus. He nodded, his eyes filled with sadness. I need to tell her the truth, Naomi. About us. I can't keep lying to her, not when she's so close to the end. Naomi felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had been so caught up in her own problems that she hadn't even considered how this was affecting Marcus. I understand, she said quietly. What do you want me to do? Marcus reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. I want you to come with me. We'll tell her together. Naomi's heart ached at the thought of breaking Eleanor's heart, but she knew Marcus was right. They couldn't keep lying to her. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's do it. The next day they drove to Eleanor's house in silence. The weight of what they were about to do hung heavy in the air, and Naomi couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled in her stomach. When they arrived, Eleanor was sitting in the sunroom, just as she had been the first time Naomi met her. She smiled when she saw them, her eyes lighting up with joy. Marcus, Naomi, what a lovely surprise. Marcus knelt beside her wheelchair, taking her hand in his. Grandmother, there's something we need to tell you. Eleanor's smile faded, and she looked at him with concern. What is it, dear? Marcus took a deep breath, his voice trembling. Naomi and we're not really married. It was a lie, a business arrangement. I'm so sorry, Grandmother. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't keep lying to you. Eleanor's expression was unreadable as she listened to his confession. When he finished, there was a long silence, and Naomi braced herself for the worst. But then, to her surprise, Eleanor began to laugh. It was a soft, gentle laugh, but it filled the room with warmth. Oh, Marcus, she said, shaking her head. You always were a terrible liar. Marcus stared at her in shock. You knew? Eleanor nodded, her eyes twinkling with amusement. Of course I knew. I may be old, but I'm not blind. I could see the truth from the moment I met Naomi. Naomi felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by guilt. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. We never meant to hurt you. Eleanor reached out and took Naomi's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. You didn't hurt me, dear. In fact, you've given me something I haven't had in a long time, Hope. Naomi frowned, confused. Hope? Eleanor smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. Yes, hope. Because even though your marriage may have started as a lie, I can see the truth in your eyes. Both of you? You care about each other. And that's all that matters. Naomi felt tears welling up in her eyes, and she looked at Marcus, who seemed just as stunned as she was. For the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to make this work. Eleanor's revelation left Naomi and Marcus in stunned silence. The weight of their deception had been lifted, but the road ahead was still fraught with uncertainty. As they left Eleanor's house that evening, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that their problems were far from over. Vanessa's blackmail still loomed, and Derek's sudden reappearance had only added to the chaos. The next morning, Naomi arrived at the office early, hoping to clear her head before the day began. But as she stepped off the elevator, she was met with a scene that made her blood run cold. The office was in an uproar, clusters of employees huddled together, whispering furiously, while others stared at their computer screens with wide eyes. Naomi's stomach churned as she approached her desk, where a small crowd had gathered. What's going on? She asked, her voice trembling. One of her colleagues turned to her, his expression a mix of pity and disbelief. You haven't seen it yet? Seen what? Naomi asked, her heart pounding. He gestured to her computer. Check your email. Naomi quickly sat down and opened her inbox. There, at the top of the list, was an email with the subject line, the truth about Marcus Harper and Naomi Carter. Her hands shook as she opened the email. It was a detailed expose, complete with photos of her and Marcus at the hotel, screenshots of their contract, and even a recording of their conversation in his office. The email had been sent to everyone in the firm. Naomi felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on Vanessa, who was standing in the corner with a smug smile on her face. Their eyes met, and Vanessa gave her a small, mocking wave. Before Naomi could react, Marcus stormed into the office, his face a mask of fury. "Everyone, listen up," he barked, his voice cutting through the noise. "This is a private matter, and it will be handled internally. Anyone caught spreading rumors or discussing this further will be dealt with immediately." The room fell silent, but the damage had already been done. Naomi could feel the weight of everyone's stares, and she knew there was no coming back from this. Later that day, Naomi and Marcus sat in his office, the tension between them palpable. The blinds were drawn, and the room was eerily quiet. "This is Vanessa's doing," Naomi said, her voice shaking. "She's the one who sent the email." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "I know, and I'm going to make sure she pays for this." Naomi felt a surge of anger. "This isn't just about Vanessa, Marcus. This is about us, about the lies we've been telling. We can't keep pretending like everything's okay." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, and I'm sorry, Naomi. I never meant for any of this to happen." Naomi felt tears welling up in her eyes. "What are we going to do? Our careers are ruined. Everyone knows the truth." Marcus stood up and walked over to her, kneeling beside her chair. "We'll figure this out, Naomi, together. But first, we need to deal with Vanessa." Naomi nodded, her mind racing. She knew Marcus was right, but she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of their problems. The next few days were a blur. Marcus launched an internal investigation into Vanessa's actions, and it didn't take long for the truth to come out. She had been the one behind the email, as well as the break-in at Naomi's office and the rumors that had been circulating. When confronted, Vanessa didn't even try to deny it. "You think you're so special," she sneered at Naomi during the disciplinary hearing. "But you're nothing, just a pawn in Marcus's game." Naomi didn't respond. She knew Vanessa was lashing out because she had been caught, but the words still stung. In the end, Vanessa was fired and banned from practicing law in the state of Georgia. It was a small victory, but it did little to ease the tension in the office. The damage had been done, and Naomi and Marcus were left to pick up the pieces. One evening, after another long day at work, Naomi found herself standing outside Marcus's apartment. She hadn't planned on coming here, but she needed to talk to him, to figure out where they stood. Marcus opened the door, his expression a mix of surprise and relief. "Naomi, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "About us." Marcus nodded and stepped aside, letting her in. They sat down on the couch, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. "I don't know what to do," Naomi admitted, her voice breaking. "Everything's a mess, and I feel like I'm losing myself." Marcus reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "I know, and I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." Naomi looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "What are we doing, Marcus? This fake marriage, the lies, it's all falling apart, and I don't know if I can keep pretending." Marcus sighed, his expression filled with regret. "I don't want to pretend anymore, Naomi. I never did. This started as a business arrangement, but it's become so much more than that, at least for me." Naomi's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" Marcus looked into her eyes, his gaze intense. "I'm saying that I care about you, Naomi, more than I ever thought possible, and I don't want to lose you." Naomi felt tears streaming down her face as she realized the truth. She cared about him too, more than she had ever admitted to herself. "I don't want to lose you either," she whispered. Marcus leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a soft, tentative kiss. It was a kiss filled with promise, with hope, and with the possibility of a future they had never dared to imagine. The kiss changed everything. What had started as a business arrangement had blossomed into something real, something neither Naomi nor Marcus had anticipated. But as they sat together on his couch, the weight of their shared secrets and the chaos of the past few weeks still hung heavy in the air. "We can't keep doing this," Naomi said softly, pulling away from Marcus. "The lies, The pretending, it's too much. I can't keep living like this. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. I know, and I don't want to either. But we need to figure out how to move forward, together. Naomi took a deep breath, her mind racing. What about your grandmother? What about the contract? Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. My grandmother already knows the truth. And as for the contract, it's just a piece of paper, Naomi. It doesn't define us. Naomi felt a surge of hope, but it was quickly tempered by doubt. What about the firm? The rumors? Everyone knows about us now. How are we supposed to move past that? Marcus reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. We'll figure it out. But first, we need to be honest with ourselves and with each other. Naomi nodded, her heart pounding. She knew he was right, but the thought of being vulnerable, of letting someone in after everything she had been through, was terrifying. The next morning, Naomi and Marcus arrived at the office together, their hands intertwined. The whispers started almost immediately, but they ignored them, walking with their heads held high. They had decided to face the rumors head-on, to show everyone that they were stronger than the lies that had been spread about them. As they stepped into the conference room for the morning meeting, the room fell silent. All eyes were on them, but Naomi and Marcus didn't flinch. They took their seats, their expressions calm and composed. Before we begin, Marcus said, his voice steady, I want to address the rumors that have been circulating. Naomi and I are in a relationship. It's not something we planned, but it's something we're both committed to. We ask for your respect and understanding as we navigate this together. The room was silent for a moment before one of the senior partners, a woman named Margaret, stood up. Marcus, Naomi, we appreciate your honesty, but this is highly unprofessional. You've put the firm in a difficult position. Marcus nodded, his expression serious. I understand your concerns, Margaret, and I take full responsibility for my actions. But I want to make it clear that Naomi's position at this firm is based on her talent and hard work, not our relationship. Margaret studied him for a moment before nodding. Very well, but this isn't over. We'll need to discuss this further. The meeting continued, but Naomi could barely focus. She knew this was just the beginning of the fallout, but she also knew that she and Marcus were in this together, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Later that day, Naomi received a text from Derek. We need to talk. Meet me at the Rusty Spoon. She hesitated, her mind racing. She hadn't spoken to Derek since their last meeting, and she wasn't sure she wanted to see him again, but she knew she couldn't avoid him forever. When she arrived at the diner, Derek was already there, sitting in the same booth as before. He looked up as she approached, his expression unreadable. Derek, she said, sliding into the booth across from him. What do you want? Derek leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. I want to know what the hell is going on, Naomi. First, you're pretending to be married to Marcus Harper, and now you're actually dating him? What are you doing? Naomi felt a surge of anger, but she forced herself to stay calm. This isn't any of your business, Derek. You lost the right to have a say in my life when you walked out on me. Derek's expression softened, and he reached out to take her hand. I made a mistake, Naomi. A huge mistake. But I'm here now, and I want to make things right. Please, just give me another chance. Naomi pulled her hand away, her heart pounding. I can't, Derek. I've moved on, and I need you to respect that. Derek's eyes filled with anger, and he leaned back in his seat. You're making a mistake, Naomi. Marcus Harper is using you. He doesn't care about you. Naomi stood up, her hands trembling. You don't know anything about Marcus, or about me. Stay out of my life, Derek. With that, she turned and walked out of the diner, her mind racing. She knew Derek wasn't going to give up easily, but she also knew that she couldn't let him control her anymore. She had made her choice, and she was going to stand by it. That evening, Naomi and Marcus sat together on his couch, the events of the day weighing heavily on their minds. Derek came to see me, Naomi said quietly. He wants me to give him another chance. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. I told him no, Naomi continued, her voice trembling. But I'm scared, Marcus, scared of what he might do. Marcus pulled her into his arms, holding her close. You don't have to be scared, Naomi. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Naomi felt tears streaming down her face as she buried her head in his chest. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that she and Marcus were in this together, and that was enough. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of challenges and revelations. Naomi and Marcus faced the fallout from the office scandal head-on, but the tension in the firm was palpable. Despite their efforts to maintain professionalism, the whispers and sideways glances persisted. Naomi felt like she was constantly under a microscope, and the stress was beginning to take its toll. One evening, as she and Marcus sat in his apartment, Naomi finally broke down. "I can't do this anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "The rumors, the judgment, it's too much. I feel like I'm drowning." Marcus pulled her into his arms, his voice soft but firm. "We'll get through this, Naomi. But we need to be honest with each other. No more secrets." Naomi nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You're right. There's something I need to tell you." Marcus frowned, his expression concerned. "What is it?" Naomi took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "When I was a kid, my mom saved a little boy from kidnappers. It was all over the news. She was a hero." Marcus's eyes widened in shock. "Wait, your mom is that woman? The one who saved the Harper family's son?" Naomi nodded, her stomach churning. "Yes, that little boy was you." Marcus stared at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and awe. I can't believe it. All this time and I had no idea." Naomi felt a wave of guilt wash over her. "I didn't know either, not until recently. But when I realized the truth, I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared it would change things between us." Marcus reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "It doesn't change how I feel about you, Naomi. If anything, it makes me care about you even more. Your mom saved my life, and now you've saved me in a different way." Naomi felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at him. "I love you, Marcus. I didn't mean to, but I do." Marcus smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "I love you too, Naomi, and I'm not going to let anything come between us." The next morning, Naomi and Marcus arrived at the office together, their hands intertwined. They had decided to face the rumors head-on, to show everyone that they were stronger than the lies that had been spread about them. As they stepped into the conference room for the morning meeting, the room fell silent. All eyes were on them, but Naomi and Marcus didn't flinch. They took their seats, their expressions calm and composed. "Before we begin," Marcus said, his voice steady, "I want to address the rumors that have been circulating. Naomi and I are in a relationship. It's not something we planned, but it's something we're both committed to. We ask for your respect and understanding as we navigate this together." The room was silent for a moment before Margaret, the senior partner, stood up. "Marcus, Naomi, we appreciate your honesty, but this is highly unprofessional. You've put the firm in a difficult position." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "I understand your concerns, Margaret, and I take full responsibility for my actions. But I want to make it clear that Naomi's position at this firm is based on her talent and hard work, not our relationship." Margaret studied him for a moment before nodding. "Very well, but this isn't over. We'll need to discuss this further." The meeting continued, but Naomi could barely focus. She knew this was just the beginning of the fallout, but she also knew that she and Marcus were in this together, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a glimmer of hope. Later that day, Naomi received a call from the hospital. Her mom's surgery had been scheduled, and they needed her to come in to discuss the details. She felt a surge of relief, but it was quickly tempered by anxiety. The surgery was expensive, and she still didn't know how she was going to pay for it. When she arrived at the hospital, she was surprised to find Marcus waiting for her in the lobby. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Marcus smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "I'm here for you, Naomi, and for your mom. I've already taken care of the surgery costs." Naomi felt tears streaming down her face as she looked at him. "You didn't have to do that." Marcus reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Yes, I did. Your mom saved my life, Naomi. This is the least I can do." Naomi felt a wave of gratitude wash over her as she pulled him into a tight hug. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you so much." The surgery was a success, and Naomi's mom made a full recovery. As she sat by her mom's bedside, Naomi felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that she and Marcus were in this together. And that was enough. If Naomi's story of love and resilience touched you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more inspiring tales. See you in the next one.